Good morning, I'm Carson Jeffries with the Mold Firm, and I'm here today with a longtime friend and owner of Air Allergen Mold Testing.
My name is Richard Johnson. I'm the President and CEO of Air Allergen and Mold Testing. Black mold, as it's usually used, refers to a particular kind of stachybotrys spores. The problem with black mold, it's true that black mold, with the stachybotrys, particular stachybotrys chartarum, what particular species of it, can have multiple kinds of toxins associated with them. Just because you have stachybotrys doesn't necessarily mean you have those toxins, because it depends a lot on the growing conditions. But stachybotrys is an indication of conditions that are unhealthy in the indoor environment for a variety of reasons. And so the presence of stachybotrys is really a huge red flag that there's serious problems in that environment. But there are a lot of other spores that have other toxins associated with them that can be just as much of a problem, and they're found far more commonly in the indoor environment, particularly various species of Aspergillus or Penicillium. And Aspergillus and Penicillium is one of the most common spores we find in the indoor air. Water damage spores like stachybotrys, and there's half a dozen of them or so, we usually find them in about 5% of the outdoor samples. We find them in about 20% of the indoor samples. But Aspergillus and Penicillium often make up as much as 80% of the spores that we find in the indoor air. They're far higher quantities of Aspergillus Penicillium, and they can have a lot more damaging toxins associated with them because of the quantities. The other thing that we're finding in the indoor air environment is that an air sample is typically a snapshot in time. And if it doesn't happen to be that, let's say you have stachybotrys growing on your drywall, they aren't necessarily throwing the spores out into the air where you can measure them in the indoor air. Until they tend to dry out and get powdery, then they can get some spores out into the air. But the water damage spores are more likely to hold their spores during the time that they're actually growing, so you can't tell it from an indoor air sample particularly. Where we find the history of intermittent events, not just a snapshot at the moment, but we find the history is in the carpet dust. And the carpet dust we can culture, and we can we put it on a series of 8 different petri dishes with different augers and incubate them at different temperatures so we can recover what's ever in there. One of the problems in recovering stachybotrys, which is talked about as being the black mold, is most augers will not support the growth of stachybotrys. We have an auger that will do that, and in fact it's an auger that was patented by our lab director some many years ago, called SSI auger. And we can use that to recover stachybotrys if in fact it is in the carpet dust.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, tenants or homeowners should be concerned if stachybotrys is discovered, because the presence of stachybotrys indicates high water levels and likely the presence of even other harmful molds.
That's exactly right. Even if the quantity of stachybotrys itself is in low amounts, it's an indicator of potentially serious health consequences.